In triathlon, it's running that causes the most discomfort for your stomach. The up and down movement can be pretty stressful compared to the smoother movements that you experience with cycling and with swimming. Well, therefore, you need to think about when and what you're going to eat ahead of a run. So today I'm going to be bringing you a guide on pre-run fueling. Let's start at the beginning of the day. So the question is, what run are you going to be doing and when do you plan on doing it? Because if you don't have very much time in the morning and it's only going to be a short run that's a really low intensity, you can probably do that without needing any extra fuel. And it's actually a good way to teach your body to utilize the fat stores that we all have. However, if it's going to be something that's, say, longer than 60 minutes, or you've got some really high intensity intervals, then you probably want to top up those glycogen stores, because naturally overnight you will have been fasting, so your body's not going to have sugar that's ready in your blood to be used for that session. Well, then the question comes in, what to eat? But a quick caveat before we go any further, because we are all different. We've got different training demands, we have different tastes and different abilities to digest certain foods. So it's very much a personal preference. But I'm going to be bringing you my suggestions of what to eat and when.
Slow a little down is what you said. I'ma get it over in my head. White t-shirt, blue jeans. I can never get enough of you.
It's all well and good heading out for your nice, easy recovery morning run, but still some of us might require a coffee just in order to wake up and get going. But make sure you allow a window for that caffeine effect, as you might need to pop to the bathroom before going for your run. Today we are focusing on pre-race fueling, but if you happen to have done a fasted run session, then just make sure that you can fuel adequately as soon as you can afterwards. But if you've got a hard run session early on and you want to try and have something to eat before, then it's a good idea to have something with a high glycemic index, which basically means that the carbohydrates can be easily absorbed and turned into energy pretty quickly. So something like white bread with honey, for example. Now, we know that brown bread is obviously more nutritious in the fact that it's slower releasing and it's got more fiber, but before a hard run you really want to reduce the amount of fiber you're taking on, and you also want to make sure that you're getting those carbohydrates converted and into your bloodstream as quickly as possible. So before a hard run, if I've got an early one, I'll opt for just having some plain toast, maybe a bit of butter on it. The longer and lower intensity morning run, however, is a different matter, because here you can actually opt for slower releasing carbohydrates. You've got more options because your stomach's going to be under less stress as you're running at a low intensity. So you've got a little bit more choice, and you can probably also manage to eat a little bit closer to your run. But remember, you've had a natural overnight fast since your meal the night before. So if you can, you want to try and include some protein in your breakfast, but that does take longer to digest, so make sure you've got plenty of time. So if you do have 2 or more hours, something that I actually opt for ahead of my long runs, some toast, some eggs and an avocado. But if I've left it a little bit later in the morning and don't have quite as much time, I might go for some brown toast with a bit of nut butter and a banana. And then obviously a really popular pre-training fuel is porridge, but it really varies as to how you make your porridge, as to how easily it is to digest and how soon before your run you can actually eat it. If you're using milk and nuts, for example, in your porridge, then it's going to be slower releasing, which is great, but you do have to be aware that the fats can also affect your stomach, so you might need to leave a little bit longer to digest that. And then if you've got fruit in your porridge, that's going to be great for high releasing sugar to get your GI index up, but there is fiber with that as well, so again, you need to consider it. So very much it's a matter of experimentation to find out what your stomach can handle and also what you like to eat. Runs later in the day pose different problems. If you're planning a lunch run, for example, then you want to make sure you've had a really good breakfast that ticks all the boxes. But if that's not quite going to get you through all the way to lunch, then plan in a high carbohydrate snack around an hour before. So something like some rice cakes, maybe a banana, even a cereal bar, because there's nothing worse than actually getting to lunchtime and trying to go out running whilst you're hungry. It can be pretty distracting, or even worse, you end up having a snack just before and then you get a stitch. The evening run can also be tricky because if you've not eaten since lunchtime and you've got a really hard session coming up, you might well find yourself flagging midway through. So you need to plan ahead on this one. If you have got time to maybe eat something at your desk a good few hours before, then include something that's got some protein, fats and carbohydrates, so it will definitely keep you going and make sure you're fully sustained. But if it starts to get a bit closer to that run, then you can consider something like some plain pasta, which is still easy to digest and has very limited fibre. But if it gets really close to your run and you suddenly remember, oh my goodness, I haven't eaten anything for a few hours, then there's not actually any harm in delving into the sweets jar at work, because they're going to have very little effect or stress on your stomach, but will give you a good boost in sugar levels pretty quickly. And another factor that we actually mentioned talking about in the morning is caffeine. But caffeine not only obviously wakes you up in the morning and gets you going, but it also can help you nail a really hard session. But remember, it does take a little while to take an effect. So you need to have your caffeine probably an hour before your session so that you can really make the most of it. And if you are having a milky coffee, you probably want to allow a little bit longer as well so that your stomach can fully digest it. So far, I've talked a lot about actual food, but there are plenty of nutrition products on the market that are designed specifically to help you pre and even during your run. So products such as gels or shot blocks are great. If you suddenly get to, say, lunchtime, you've got to plan a run in and you realise you've not got time to eat or digest anything, then you could take a gel, and by the time you finish your warm-up, that sugar should have well and truly got into your blood. Another option, if you're sat at your desk and you're normally drinking water, you can replace that with an energy drink before your run, so you can just top up your glycogen levels that way. I am focusing on pre-run fueling, but if you're heading out and you're not sure quite how well prepared your body is, then put a gel in your pocket, and if you do start to struggle, you can always pop that, and the energy and sugar will hit you pretty quickly. Now obviously energy products are very low in protein and in fibre. That's for a reason. They are purely designed to give you fuel for that session. They're not designed as nutrients. So if you do actually have the ability to have a proper meal or nutritious snack longer before and get all of the nutrition that your body needs, that is preferable. But then the closer it gets to the run, the more you want to reduce or limit the amount of protein, fibre and fat, because that takes much longer to digest. I focus heavily on energy levels and glycogen throughout this video, but for your body to function optimally, it needs to be adequately hydrated, because even a small amount of dehydration can actually result in a significant drop in your performance. So therefore, you want to just try and stay on top of it throughout the day. Just making sure you've got water next to your desk is a good idea, because you don't want to suddenly get to the afternoon and you're about to go out for your run and you realise you've not drunk enough, and then try and down a pint of water, because all that's going to happen, it's going to glug around in your stomach. You're probably going to get a stitch, and you might well end up having to stop for a pee mid-run. I know you might well have been hoping for the answer as to what to eat and when exactly, but at the end of the day, it really is personal preference. A big part comes down to taste, but then also your stomach sensitivity. So you've just got to go out there and work out what works for you through trial and error. And the same goes for race day. So make sure, if you know you've got a race coming up, that you practice that pre-race breakfast if it's a morning race. And the same with the timing, so eat the same amount of time before your race as you would your training session, so you can really check that it's going to work for you. And even if you've got a race later in the day, still replicate that as well. And then you can really fine tune it. And you might still sometimes get it wrong, but I find that if I'm maybe worried I'm a little bit underfueled for a run session I've got coming up, there's no harm in putting a gel in your pocket. You don't have to use it, but then if you do suddenly find your energy levels dropping, you know you've got it there. And also, it's just quite a psychological boost, and you probably will find you'll be fine without it. But like I said, so personal. So let us know what works for you before your runs, how long you have to leave before you eat, before you go on your run, and what sort of foods you can digest easily, because you never know, we might all learn something by sharing here. So if you've enjoyed it, hit the thumb up button, hit the globe to subscribe. And if you want to know what you shouldn't eat before a run, there's quite a funny video on that just down here. And if you want some tips on nutrition on the go, especially designed for triathletes, that video is just down here.